In today's episode, we will be talking with Gustavo Monje. Gustavo is a meditation teacher, emotional fitness coach, and professor of English and literature at Northern Virginia Community College. He is the host of the YouTube channel Tantra Thoughts that has been up and running for about 6 years now, providing people with tantric wisdom and meditation techniques. We've decided to bring him in to talk today about relationships, spirituality, sexuality, and also emotional fitness. Because here at My Sex Bio, we aim to offer you a holistic view of sex and sexuality. And hey, where mind and spirit are actually affects the way we experience our sex life. So, welcome, Gustavo. Thank you for being here with us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm great, Diana. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. So I guess we could start just because Tantra is such a, like a wide topic and there are so many paths and interpretations. I think the first question we can start with is, what is Tantra to you? Or what's the way you see Tantra and the way you're working with it?
Tantra is a spiritual tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's debatable, its origins. A lot of academics trace Tantra back just around 2,000 years. But Tantra was really born at a time where there was no written language, there was no historical records being kept, and it was largely an oral tradition, much like indigenous traditions around the world that also go back thousands of years. So it's an ancient spiritual science that comes from the indigenous people of India. And the goal of Tantra is to become one with the supreme consciousness, become one with Brahma. And that is accomplished through meditation, that is accomplished through a sense of devotion and having a relationship with this supreme consciousness. It's largely based on meditation and also taking your this desire for perfection, for enlightenment, and not just keeping it within yourself, but also bringing that out into the world. So much like indigenous traditions have a scope for, seeing the plants as one, and the minerals as one, and the animals as your siblings. In the same way, Tantra externalizes this spiritual edification and externalizes it so that you try to make the world a better place. You try to see everything as one, since in the end, the goal of Tantra is to be one with not just Brahma, but Brahma in all of its expressions and in all of its forms.
What are the core concepts? Maybe you just mentioned Brahma, for example. Maybe for somebody who has never heard of these things, what are the key concepts to keep in mind that maybe you might be mentioning in the interview later?
Brahma? What is Brahma? Brahma is the Sanskrit word for supreme consciousness. And Brahma is made up of two principles, consciousness and energy, or in Sanskrit, Purusha and Prakriti. So that means that Brahma is observing everything in the universe, and Brahma is doing everything in the universe. Much like us, we have the capacity to do things, but we're always observing ourselves doing things. So we're a reflection of Brahma. So we also are a composite of consciousness and energy at any given moment. Well, meditation. So it's based on mantra meditation. And the meditation, the mantra itself is it's like a password that you have. Every time you repeat it, you ideate on it. Yeah, so you don't repeat it like a parrot. You have to think about what it means every time you say it. You have to visualize what it means every time you say it. And usually your mantra means something like, I am consciousness, or all is consciousness, or I am that supreme consciousness. And the Sanskrit word that is your mantra, you keep secret. It's passed down from a teacher to a student, and that should be kept private just for you. So I would say those are important points. And then, of course, there's a whole philosophy in Tantra that has to do with chakras, has to do with layers of the mind, chambers of the mind, has to do with nadis and breathing techniques and concentration techniques, and also a moral code. The moral code is yama and niyama, which is the code of ethics in yoga. So it's very vast.
And I had never heard of this code of ethics. Um,
Mm.
Maybe can you talk a little bit about it? Or
It's very important. It's highly important because a lot of times this is what's missing in the yoga studios is the 10 moral principles of yama and niyama. It's also in Patanjali's 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. So, and Patanjali is like such a huge authority in the world of yoga. I don't think there's a yoga teacher training that can go without talking about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and his 8 limbs of yoga. And so the first two are yama and niyama, and these are 10 moral codes. Like just as an example, the first one in yama is ahimsa. It means not to hurt anybody with words, thoughts, or actions. The second one is satya. It means not to always use your words for good in the name of benevolence. So, and number three, asteya, not stealing. So just those three. I mean, if you just practice those three, and if everybody in the world practiced those three, I mean, think of what a totally different world we would live in if you're consciously trying not to hurt people, trying to always use your words positively, and you don't take what doesn't belong to you. You know, so just those three in themselves create such a powerful transformation. But if the yoga studios aren't teaching these, then the yogis that learn yoga, they could make mistakes. And we've seen, so many gurus that act immorally, so many people that do yoga and meditation, but yet they don't have this moral base. They can still cause a lot of damage to others and themselves. So part of the reason why these moral, ethical principles should be firmly in place in oneself is because when you meditate, you actually gain a lot of power just in the basics. You get a lot of concentration, a lot of uh, intuitive development and emotional development, but all of that could be used for something bad, and when it gets used for something bad, especially when it hurts other people, then the practice just crumbles. So it's important that you have a moral base, so that when you meditate and you develop these benefits, then you'll use them for good.
I'd like to know, how has Tantra, how has it impacted your life? What has it meant in your life? And I think we can divide this in different, aspects, but let's start with, as a person, what's the impact that Tantra has had in yourself as the human you are?
Well, I mean, not only has it helped me spiritually so that I can develop my spiritual life, develop my relationship with Brahma, right? With what we call God or supreme consciousness. So not only has it helped in that way, but it also has given me so many teachers, so many people that transformed my life, that gave me so much wisdom, passed down so much wisdom. And also it has given me a moral code, like I was saying, like the yamas and niyamas, because without any of these things, I just don't know how my life would just be hell. you know, Unfortunately, we complicate our lives so much, and we a lot of our negative propensities are always being triggered in our society. And so if we don't have something to counter that or to balance that with a lot of positivity in your life that involves spirituality, meditation, spiritual community, a sense of values that you live by, if you don't have that to balance, I know, my life would be completely out of control, So it's done it's an enormous thing for myself personally. And also it gives me an opportunity to touch people's lives, to help people, to be of service. Because if I wouldn't be doing so much spiritual work, maybe I would have done more music, which I was already doing in the past. So pop music, rock music, salsa music, and maybe that could have made some kind of impact, maybe. But I think a better impact is what I'm doing now, because I think that meditation is something that can transform people from within, you know?
And how about relationships? How has it
Yeah,
impacted your relationships and the way you communicate and talk to other people and relate to them?
it that's where it hasn't done everything, I still have arguments with my mom. That never goes away. Because
It's like it won't.
what?
It won't. It's part of life.
Right. Especially when you have a mom that doesn't approve of what you do, like in terms of your spiritual life. I was brought up Christian, so my mom would prefer that I was Christian, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many there's tensions in our life that one day hopefully will get resolved. And a lot of times those tensions are in our relationships, you know. So it doesn't necessarily cure all, right? But when you follow tantric principles, it means that in your relationship you see the other person as Brahma, as the divine. So as much as possible, you try to remember that this person you're speaking with is Brahma, is an expression of the divine. So you treat them as such. So imagine how that influences you in the way you treat your children. When I see my child, when I see my son, I'm not just taking care of a little boy. I'm taking care of the supreme consciousness in the form of a little boy. Or when I'm talking to my partner in the same way, you see your partner as an expression of the supreme. So on your best days, when you remember these things, it makes a huge difference. And then following the yamas and niyamas, I think that every couple should become familiar with these principles and practice them in the family, practice them in your relationship.
Yeah, they are. And I think what you just said is so important also because um you can look at that in many different ways, right? But you're sharing the perspective from Tantra and how just thinking that, of course, changes the way we relate to people. And then just that simple thought can help us be more respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you think about people just as another human being, that helps you um, be more empathetic, because it's like, okay, these are people, and they have the feelings that I experience, and then you can be empathetic. But certainly having that in mind of like, this is an expression of the supreme consciousness, gives you like, this is a precious life in front of me, and then I should be treating it as such, and caring for it in that way. And I think that's very nice, because just for example, what's happening right now in the world wouldn't be happening if we all thought of people that way. So that is pretty beautiful. One thing that is very important for relationships is communication, right? So how do you think that Tantra can help us have better conversations with our partners, with our friends, and with our community, just to elevate our own personal journey and path?
So the second principle in the yamas and niyamas is satya. And satya means to use your words in the name of benevolence. So with your partner, you want to speak with them with a lot of care, with a lot of gentleness, because we human beings have the capacity to apply appropriate pressure to anything. You know, if I want to, we can smack or you can caress, right? So as much as possible, you try to be gentle with words. Really, all of those yamas and niyamas, if you practice them with your partners, you're going to transform that relationship. Ahimsa means not hurting. So don't hurt your partner with words, thoughts, or actions. That doesn't mean that you don't have self-defense, you know. Um, so ahimsa, sometimes ahimsa is misinterpreted to mean nonviolence. And nonviolence is also like a dogma. Some people think they have to be nonviolent in all circumstances, but that's not true because you have to also defend yourself. And then there is, so we could actually go through all of those 10 principles and see and just apply those to relationships. If you'd like, we can cover a few more in yama. I talked about asteya earlier, non-stealing, not depriving people of their due is also considered stealing. So that can translate obviously into relationships. You don't deprive your partner of affection. You don't deprive your partner of understanding, um, and um, and then there is brahmacharya, which means to see everything as an expression of the divine. So we talked about that earlier, seeing your partner as an expression of the divine. And aparigraha means to live simply. So if you live simply too, you're not so concerned with material accumulation. And that could also help you not treat your partner, you know, as as an object. I think our society gives us makes us feel like people are just as expendable as objects, as material things, but we should have more care, right? When we're dealing with human beings, um, we should have more care with the expressions of consciousness that are more developed, you know. That includes human beings, that includes animals, um, and so if you want a purely tantric perspective, those are some ideas. But I think aside from tantra, you need to be very well educated in how to develop relationships, because I think one of the things that we all want is we all want to have good relationships. But one of the things that we least invest in as a people is in education on relationships. So so that needs to change. You know, people should be reading those books to help people have better relationships, going to seminars, going with your partners to educational events. You know, we go on dates to see movies and to have dinner, but go on a date to hear a chat about, you know, how to improve your relationship. Because what you really want is you want that relationship to succeed, right? So I think that's very, very important there. There's also other principles that I can talk about. Uh, um, my my guru is named Sri Sri Anandamurti, and he put together these 15 qualities of how to really bring a lot of love into your life, improve your relationships. If you follow these practices, people, they respect you. They see you as somebody who uh, is like a dear sort of.
Caring,
Sorry.
caring,
Yeah.
maybe.
Right. And so just some of those basic uh, principles are like forgiveness. If you make a mistake, acknowledge that you made a mistake, and ask what you can do to make up for it. Don't criticize. Um, don't practice that's super important, in relationships, is not to overly criticize your partner, and to not overly criticize anybody. Those are just a few, that come from the realm of Tantra.
I think that is very important. And I like to highlight that idea of how many things that we see in today's media and society makes us feel that people are like they're at a disposition more than just other human beings with feelings and a lot of other things. And I think personally, I've seen that happen a lot. And for some reason, we also think that we have sex and relationships just figured out, that we don't need to learn about it, that we just know what to do. And we actually usually don't. Precisely because of that, because there is also this lack of education, not only sex education, which has to do with relationships, but also education about how to have relationships. Because in sex is not only the physical act of, intercourse. Sex is a lot more. Sex is the way I communicate with my partner. And that's part of my relationship. And it's part of a relationship with a partner as much as it can be part of a relationship with a friend or anybody else. And I think just this idea, and that's something that I learned, I would say pretty recently, that I found out that we have this view of people in terms of our needs. So it's like I have this person in front of me, but instead of seeing the person that I have in front of me, I rush to see first, how are they going to fulfill needs that I have? And then sometimes we forget, or we don't see that behind the act of maybe fulfilling any need that you have for live somebody, maybe you need someone to listen to you, maybe you need affection, maybe you need, physical touch, whatever it is. This person has to make an effort to give you that, because it's coming from another human being who is deciding to give you this as a gift. So it's not really something that you can just go and say, yeah, that's there, and like I don't have to worry or think about it. So I think it's very important what you just mentioned, because thinking of these things as things we need to educate ourselves all the time about and become better at, because despite what they make us believe, we don't have it figured out. And the way we see portrayed usually in the media, and that, and even the way that our parents sometimes teach us that relationships work, maybe are not the ways, maybe they're not the best ways. They are certainly not the only ways. And maybe they're not the way for us, that the one that's going to make us feel good. How would you say that Tantra and sex intersect?
I would say that there's three types of sex. There's physical sex, mental sex, and spiritual sex. Physical sex is when you have sexual intercourse with somebody, right? You're engaged in sexual activity with another person physically. Mental sex is when you imagine that you are having sex with another person. So it's all happening in the mind. And as you know, if it happens in the mind, there's a reaction in the body.
Of course.
And then there is spiritual sex. Spiritual sex is now a psycho-spiritual activity. So it's now the idea of, because when you're having physical sex and mental sex, you are connecting with another person, right? So, but when you're having spiritual sex, now you are connecting with the divine, with the supreme consciousness. So just like you want to connect with another person and be one, we have also a desire to want to connect with that supreme entity and also be one with them. So I think that spiritual sex, like any type of sex, is really just the desire to be allowed into somebody else's world, right? It's desire to be embraced by another person. And that place of vulnerability is actually the most intimate thing that we can have happen to us. So it's a craving that we have. It's something we all long to experience. And that same idea gets applied now to your relationship with the divine, that you also want to enter the divine, be embraced by the divine, be one with the divine. And so that's to me what spiritual sex is. And that's to me um, how Tantra intersects. Now, you could also be having physical sex with somebody and apply tantric principles where you're making love with your partner, but you feel in that moment that you're actually making love with the supreme consciousness. So when you kiss them, you feel like you're kissing the supreme consciousness. When you're holding them, you feel like you're holding the supreme consciousness. That type of ideation can really make your sexual experience or any activity tantric, because another word for tantric is just spiritual. And sometimes people they need someone to help them process, right? So they may not even know how to articulate. You may be asking your partner, "What's wrong? Well, why isn't this working? Why you?" But it's quite possible that your partner can't even articulate why they feel the way they do. And so there's something there that they still have to process. And so if you become aware of that, then you have to be a little patient and you have to encourage that first to gain clarity, because the person has to have clarity within themselves first before they can be clear with you. And then there's so many things we're socialized around sex, right? Like, um, so many people say, "Oh, the more sex you have, the better the relationship. If you're not having sex, you're lame. You have a bad relationship." And these are all just like
It's just society.
yeah, exactly. It's the chatter, right? It's the chatter going on that doesn't necessarily have to. You don't have to believe that. You don't have to get us. It's like the many thoughts in your mind. You have countless thoughts in your mind. Doesn't mean you have to believe them, all of them, because there's
That would
so
be
many.
crazy.
Exactly, so many ridiculous thoughts that come into the mind all the time. Imagine if you believed each one of them, right? Or followed through on each one of them.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Okay. And did learning about Tantra imply that you had to unlearn maybe concepts, worldviews, ideas that you had before you actually ran into Tantra?
Yeah, what comes to mind is, well, first of all, I think that for me to have opened up to Tantra, first I had to unlearn my religious background. So actually, I did that early on. When I was 14, I became an atheist, thanks to a couple of friends who were atheists, and they influenced me in that way. And that was actually really helpful, really, really good, because what they were rebelling against was all the dogma in religion, all of the illogical beliefs that also are unfair. They put women down. They're based on uh, dogmas and blind beliefs. So that was the initial rejection, right? We don't want religion because religion doesn't seem to make much sense on a philosophical level. It has other important values and properties, like religion teaches about charity, about compassion, helping the poor. So it has really good values, but that intellectual side just never made sense, or at least started to clash with me when I was 14. So that divorced me from my own religious upbringing, so that somehow now I was left with an empty plate. And it didn't take long for me to discover Eastern traditions that I found more interesting, like Taoism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And so when I learned about that, then I realized, oh, there's more. There's more out there. And I met friends who were Wiccan, who had earth-based traditions that they were doing. And so I found that interesting. And then when the opportunity came to learn meditation, I went with that, and then that led me to Tantra. So I think that's what I had to unlearn, and that was like a pre-unlearning before I would practice Tantra. But then going forward, I have to think about that a little bit more. Certainly Tantra forces you to be a better person. Um, I've been practicing meditation for many years, and for 20 years, been practicing Tantra for 20 years. But that doesn't mean that I was always on, the best person that I could be in different situations. And that could be because maybe I wasn't practicing correctly at the time. Maybe I wasn't following my teacher's uh, recommendations properly. Um, and so, and now I guess I'm jumping off to another topic, but I'll close with this. So basically, your spiritual life is important, but sometimes it's not everything. So although Tantra means a lot and meditation is very important to practice, there are still people that I know who practice meditation and are still making lots of stupid mistakes, you know? And so there is something to be said that one must also be willing to have an intellectual approach, and also, get a lot of mental health training, get therapy if required, become well versed in topics of emotional fitness. You know what I mean? Because if you just sort of say the only thing that there is for me is my spiritual beliefs, but you reduce intellectual curiosity that could potentially allow you to learn other things that make you a better person, and primarily things that have to do with mental health, then you could be missing out, you know, because we're not, if you practice meditation, it's not going to happen overnight that you become one with the supreme consciousness. You're going to be here for a while. You're going to have beautiful meditations, but in the next morning, you're going to be right back in your room, and your mom's going to be yelling at you from the other room all over again. So that's why it's not enough to just, so how I'd like to answer your question is not so, what you have to unlearn is that your spiritual practices are very important, but you have to unlearn an idea that that's all that's required. You also need a lot of intellectual development that can allow you to be not to increase your intellect, to help you analyze things better, to help you with mental health, emotional health,
make better decisions too.
Right. Be more productive, make better decisions. So I hope that makes sense how I answered. It took me a while to get there.
That's okay. It's the way it's what your process took you to, because what I see here is that's what the unlearning from the dogma from religion implied, which was I can have my spiritual practice and still, give my brain the tools it needs so that I can be a better human, like, and live my life better, the everyday life with the little tiny things that you have to do every day. So what's your approach to it? What's your approach to coaching?
My approach to coaching is, good question.
I guess it's from Tantra, right? But
no, I mean, the reason why I said that is because it's not so much what is my approach, it's what are people coming with.
Okay.
Right. So, and then based on that, to respond to that, based on that, to be of service to that, and as people say, create space for that. So we all know that we're emotional beings, right? We have a huge range of emotions, and many of those emotions terrify us. We don't know how to deal with them. It's such a shame, right? It's such a gosh, like, talk about being flawed talk as a species, right? Every religion has said, like Christianity says, human beings have original sin. Buddhism says every human being has an ego, and that spreads to other Eastern traditions, and Hinduism talked about this concept of Maya, like an illusion, the illusions of the world, the illusions in oneself. So we certainly are not perfect in any way. And usually we realize our imperfections through our emotions, because we punish ourselves with our own emotions. When we make mistakes, we go into a state of depression, anger, and so we need somebody to help us sometimes, if necessary, to teach us how to process emotions, to teach us how to have a better relationship with our emotions. And because what we're usually doing is just suppressing them, we're trying to ignore them, and then we fall back into patterns, into negative patterns. So an emotional fitness coach should help you to have tools and strategies for how to deal with difficult emotions, and also provide you with new perspectives. So, for example, a better perspective on what it means to be successful, what it means to have a good relationship, what it means to be happy, a perspective on how to view oneself, and so emotional fitness is also about that a wave of self-improvement, to always be trying to improve oneself, and releasing the mental bondages that we have in the mind, meaning um, selfishness, like um, I'm thinking now of success. How we have this idea of success that if I'm not successful, then I'm a loser. And so when we fall back into that, that's a mental bondage that we create. So we have to learn to break free from those things, um, and also open up to spirituality. So I would say that that's kind of sums up my approach, is learning how to deal with our negative emotions, but then also changing our perspective on life, because so much of what we've been taught is what's creating our negative emotions.
So is that what it means to arrive at your highest self?
To arrive at your highest self, I would say to arrive at your highest self means um, to arrive at your Buddha self,
Okay.
right? That's a transcendent state. Um, Abraham Maslow, right? The American psychologist who created who created the theory of motivation, and so he talked about these needs, different layers of needs that human beings have, starting from physiological needs all the way up to a need for self-actualization, which means to fulfill your true potential in life. Like all of us, at a certain point, we want to fulfill our highest potential in whatever activity that we're engaged in whatever way we would like. But before he died, he expanded that pyramid, and the highest layer became to arrive at a transcendent state. So that goes beyond uh, our full potential in any sort of um, earthly sense. It actually means to evolve, to go from being a human being to, say, becoming like a God. So we're on that evolution. We've evolved from being an animal to becoming now a human being and being fully human. And now the evolution for a human being is now to become, as divine as possible.
And how can we maybe more easily identify these negative emotional patterns that we get into that affect our mental wellness?
Well, I think we have to maybe go through the emotions, have some sort of like human emome. You know how there's the human genome where the scientists have identified all of the genes that human beings have. We can I try to identify all of the emotions, and I think actually as culture changes, so do emotions. You know, um, for example, uh, when we think today of nostalgia, nostalgia usually means nowadays when you're kind of romanticizing a time in the past or thinking about a certain time in your life, right? Oh, this reminds me when I was a child, right? Oh, this city reminds me of when I went to camp, when I went to vacations with my family in these small towns. But the original word nostalgia, for example, when it first was developed by doctors in Europe, nostalgia was a syndrome for people that missed their house. So so then and that's it, you know. So people could get diagnosed with nostalgia, and the cure was you need to go home, you need to go back to your house. But over time, that emotion expanded. It's not just a um, uh, the idea of missing your home. It could be the idea of missing a time in your life, a particular moment, or a particular activity you used to do. So it's expanded. So our emotions are expanding throughout time, and different cultures even have different perspectives on certain emotions. You know, and but it would be helpful. A good place to begin is to just take time to go through as many emotions as possible so that you can learn to name them when they come up. And one thing that's beautiful about Tantra is that the chakras in Tantra, they have petals, right? So the first chakra has 4 petals, the second chakra has 6 petals, the third chakra has 10 petals. So they all have different numbers of petals. And each of those petals is ascribed a vritti, which is an emotion. Um, so, for example, one of the petals in the third chakra, which is where the navel is, where the belly button is shame, you know. And another one there is basically anger, peevishness. And so you see, another one there is jealousy. So sometimes human beings claim that, they say when they get angry, they feel it in their stomach. I know I do. When I'm angry, my stomach twitches, I notice that. And, uh, and maybe when people feel ashamed, like they want to throw up, they want to vomit, because that's a digestion thing, and that's where the third chakra is. It's in that part of the body. So Tantra has if you learn all of the vrittis, what each of those petals represents, then right there is a good framework for you to name all of the emotions. Oh, here I have emotion, jealousy, this, that, you know. So I think that's a good start, because once you can name the emotions, then you can identify them as they pop up in the mind, and then learn to see all of them as your friends. You know, the emotions are no different than our organs. You know, we wouldn't, if right now I'm hungry, but I don't feel like eating because I want to do something else. I'm not going to rip out my stomach and say I don't need you because I want to do this right now. We would never do that, because we
That's
know
true.
that the stomach has a function, right? Even though in this moment it's acting as like kind of like my little enemy, but it actually has a deeper function. So does all of our emotions. Anger has a deeper function. Fear has a deeper function. The ugliest emotions, even sadism, cruelty, they have their place in a particular context. So we never want to suppress them or hate them. We want to get to know them, and let them do their job, which is basically to teach us something, to point something out, to remind us of something. Another question that I think is helpful to ask a partner is what are your what are your flaws? What are your challenges? You know, listen, you and I, we're both imperfect. Okay. So you know that if you don't know that going in, this is a fact. Okay. I'm imperfect. I have many flaws. I have many problems. I have many traumas. I have lots of stuff I'm dealing with. This is who I am. And you are no different. I know that. So why don't you share with me in what are the tensions in your life that either you've resolved or are still unresolved? And I'll share with you what are the tensions in my life. What are the marks that life has left on you? And I will show you, I will reveal the marks that life has left on me. And once we can see each other like that, then you can make a choice. You've been through a little too much for me. I, you know, I don't know if I can handle your tensions, your imperfections. You like to drink and drive, for example. I don't know if that's something that I can handle, right? Or you have a problem with commitment. Okay, that I need someone who can handle commitment. So not only do you get informed, what are the other person's challenges and difficulties, uh, and you should believe people, because we tend not to.
Yes.
Maya Angelou said that believe people the first time they show you who they are, right? And also believe people when they tell you verbally issues that they have. So you going into a relationship, you should choose what you can handle. And if you can't handle something, you should very, amicably say, thank you very much. It was nice meeting you. But I have to go, right? So that's important. And then if you choose to stay in the relationship, it means then that you choose to accept this person's emotional imperfections. And as their partner, it becomes your job to treat them the same way you would a child. A child is going to throw tantrums. A child needs attention, needs food, needs care. A child needs physical touch. I'm a parent. I have a son. My son is 2 years old. Not a day. I can't imagine a day where I don't hug him. I don't kiss him. I don't hold him. We don't touch each other's cheeks. I cannot imagine a day like that. And my son and everybody was like that. You were like that. I was like that. Everybody was once a baby like that. So that means that everybody needed that. Everybody. What makes us think that we don't need that today? We
That's
need
true.
we need exactly the same things. Really not much different. That means every day. Now, of course, yes, you get older. You shouldn't expect that also, because now, you have to also deal with the reality that you're no longer an adorable baby anymore. Now
Yeah.
you're a
People don't want to
grown
hug you all the
man.
time anymore.
Right. You're a grown man who's aging and blah, blah, blah. So people are not going to run up to you and like they would if you were a little baby. But the principles remain the same. That grown man or grown woman still needs all of that attention and affection. So if you're going to partner up with somebody, and you're means you're willing to take on their flaws, their craziness, all of their problems become your problems. That's what it means to be married. You become one with that person while still maintaining your identities. But if they have a problem, that's going to be your problem. If they're in debt, that's going to turn into your debt if you're married and you share your finances. If they have a crazy mother, she's going to be your crazy mother too, because she's now your crazy mother-in-law. So you want to be very cautious with who you join a relationship with. And then once you do, you have to be skilled at nurturing that person and skilled at helping them also with their emotional imbalances. I mean, and if you're not skilled, you have, I recommend that you educate yourself and you try, and because we all play a role for our partners. We're their friend, we're their teacher, we're their cheerleader, we're their parent, we're their best friend. We should never be their enemy, their critic, their worst critic. We should never be like their like a business partner. You're not putting in your share. Fuck that. Like, of course, things have to be fair, but it's more your relationship with your partner is it's going to get complicated. So you need to choose wisely and you need to step up to the plate.
Thank you so much for being here, Gustavo.
Thank you, Diana. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. You're doing a wonderful service to your community. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you all next time with another Sex Talks with Diana. Sex Talks with Diana is produced by My Sexual Biography, an educational platform meant to empower people like you to take command of your sexual story. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify at My Sexual Bio. Visit our website and join our e-letter at mysexbio.org, and support our work by joining our Patreon. If you enjoyed this talk, please share it with a friend to continue the conversation. See you next time!